The points of view and content on Voices of the Community are those of the speaker and do not reflect those of the stations, its management, administration, and the Board of Trustees of City College of San Francisco. If you would like to make comments about the Voices of the Community's program, please go to Mixcloud and search for Voices of the Community to leave a comment in the comment section of the show. This is George Coster from Voices of the Community, and welcome to our Election Day show. The goal of today's show is to educate our listeners to the San Francisco election and discuss the pros and cons of the key propositions. I hope that after listening to our show today, you will participate in the election, especially given the prediction that only 25 to 30% of eligible voters in San Francisco will actually vote. For some context of this, how this low voter turnout will impact our community, there are about 626,000 people who are eligible to vote in San Francisco, according to the California Secretary of State, which is an all-time high and an increase of around 100,000 since the year 2000. So if the prediction of only 25 to 30% of eligible but unregistered voters and registered voters choose not to exercise their democratic right, we will reach a high of as much as 500,000 residents who do not engage in our democracy. So you still have time to get your vote heard today, get your ballot in to the ballot box, and you can do that by dropping off your ballot at a polling station in your neighborhood or drop-off stations outside of San Francisco City Hall until 8 o'clock tonight. Or you can drop off your mail-in ballot at the nearest post office in San Francisco, and you just need to have it postmarked today, that's November 3rd today, and have that ballot in the mailbox before they close, which is around 5 o'clock. That way it's postmarked for today and gets to the election department by no later than November 6th to be valid. I want to now turn over to our show and to our show expert, which is Ashley James. Ashley is with the League of Women Voters, and we're going to bring her in by phone.
This is Ashley.
Hi, Ashley. It's George from KCSF, and I'm glad that we were able to get you technically patched into our show today. And audience, I just want to let you know Ashley James is with the League of Women Voters, and she's the chair of their Pros and Cons Guide to the election, and we'll be discussing the Pros and Cons Guide for the San Francisco election, along with the propositions in detail. So, Ashley, welcome to Voices of the Community.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be able to present the guide to your listeners, which is the result of a lot of hard work from our Voter Services Committee starting in July.
And Ashley, could you give the audience just a quick background about yourself and why you as a volunteer took it upon yourself, along with your team, to actually put together this very informative pro and cons guide to the election?
Yeah, so my background is in economics and policy, and I work as an urban planner and am passionate about the same things that the League is passionate about, which are a commitment to active participation in government in a nonpartisan way. In my work, I do a lot of community engagement activities and outreach, and really just want to help promote active participation and information about our way of government, and I've been involved with the League for about 2 years.
Why don't we go ahead and just start on the propositions? So there are a lot of propositions on San Francisco's ballot this year, and I figured we would just start to provide some context of how your team works on pros and cons. Let's take an easy one like Proposition A.
Definitely. So measures A, F, I, D, and K this year all relate to the issue of affordable housing via a voter initiative or a voter supervisor's petition, or in the case of Proposition A, is an affordable housing bond. This was placed on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors and requires a 2/3 vote to pass. And the question is, should the city of San Francisco be authorized to issue $310 million in general obligation bonds to finance the acquisition, development, and preservation of both new and existing affordable housing units? Some background on this proposition is that San Francisco adopted a policy to build or rehabilitate 30,000 new housing units by the year 2020, with at least 33% of those units affordable to low and moderate income households. The city funds affordable housing through property taxes, hotel taxes, developer fees, and other public and private sources. However, the city does not expect funds from all of these sources to meet the adopted policy goal and is requesting to borrow up to $310 million by issuing this bond. So the controller for the city has stated that it's city policy to limit the amount of money it borrows by retiring existing debt, and therefore the property tax rate is not expected to increase as a result of this bond if it were to be issued. So a yes vote means that you authorize the city to sell up to $310 million in bonds, and a no vote means you do not authorize the city to do so. And I'll go through some arguments both in favor and against this proposition. Some arguments in favor is that it would provide the funds needed to implement Mayor Lee's affordable housing goals. And it also creates new housing opportunities for those most in need by maintaining this 33% affordability to low and moderate income households. And, those households include families, veterans, seniors, and the disabled by directly investing into initiatives that will keep the city affordable and allow more residents to stay. Another important argument in favor of this is that the measure restores public housing so that low-income residents don't have to live in buildings that are unsafe. Some arguments against this proposition is the argument that public bonds are usually the most wasteful way to pay for local government services. And there's money to be made by people and entities by encouraging issuing unneeded municipal bonds. And then another argument against this proposition is related to the specific language. It states that $310 million may be allocated to various uses related to housing rather than the words shall be spent on, which gives spending discretion to the mayor's Office of Housing, and that office doesn't have a commission to provide oversight on how those dollars are spent. And so without the word shall, this argument believes that market rate instead of affordable housing will be built.
Since we're KCSF based here in City College of San Francisco, I wanted to turn to Proposition E for a moment and ask you if you could explain to our listening audience a little bit about the importance of Proposition E as it would relate to City College, for example.
That's a great question. So California's system of government, is a form of direct democracy, and as such, citizens or the people can initiate a petition to pass a new law or a measure if there's a required number of signatures, which in the city of San Francisco is about 50,000. So if you have a petition for a law that you'd like to see passed or put on the ballot, and you go through all of the requirements, which include getting a minimum number of signatures, it could potentially become law in the city. And so this proposition the title is Requirements for Public Meetings of Local Bodies, and it's an ordinance that was put on the ballot by an initiative petition from students at San Francisco State and would require a simple majority of votes to pass, which is 51%. So I think it's important for City College students because, as San Francisco State students have done, City College students could also do if they're passionate about an issue. So the question on this proposition is, should the city be required to broadcast all meetings live on the Internet, allow members of the public to submit via the Internet live, written, video, or audio comments from any location, meaning they don't have to be at the location where the meeting is being held, and then require those comments to be played during the meeting. It would also require any pre-recorded video testimony to be played during the meeting and allow the public or the public meeting members to request that discussion of a particular agenda item begin at a specific time. So some background on this is that the city holds about 2,000 meetings a year among over 120 public policy bodies. And the rules and procedures regarding public access to these meetings are governed by the California state law and the City of San Francisco's Sunshine Ordinance. The city currently broadcasts or live streams more than 30 meetings via TV or online at sfgovtv.com at a cost of about $3.5 million a year. Those agendas are posted 72 hours before the meeting, and the public can participate in these meetings either in person by submitting pre-recorded video within 48 hours of the meeting or by emailing comments. And this proposal would require all city meetings to be broadcast live. Also, agenda items could be petitioned to start at a certain time if more than 50 people submit a written request at least 48 hours before the meeting. And it also requires a time-certain agenda item discussion start at the time requested if it's not unreasonable or if it would not interfere with the meeting. Also, all meetings of the Community College Board and School Board would be under jurisdiction of the Sunshine Ordinance. Further, this proposition would be implemented within 6 months and may be amended by a 2/3 vote of the Board of Supervisors and signed by the mayor. The controller states that if this proposition is approved by voters, it would cost the government an ongoing annual staff cost of $750,000, and there would be new one-time costs of approximately $1.7 million to upgrade and expand the city's sites and its equipment for live streaming. The ordinance includes new required elements in the meeting process that could incur significant costs, but cannot be estimated at the time. And basically this means that they can't estimate the exact demand of the number of people that would like to participate in these meetings, and the cost is going to be based on the demand for participation, including translation, etc. So a yes vote means that you want to amend the existing Sunshine Ordinance to require the city to broadcast and live stream all meetings, allow for virtual participation through written, pre-recorded video or live video participation, provide translation services at the meetings, and allow a specific agenda item to start at a certain time. A no vote means that you do not want to make these changes. Some arguments in favor are that it increases government transparency and encourages a broader section of residents to participate. It also gives residents the right to petition for a time-certain agenda item and places the school board and community college board under the jurisdiction of the Sunshine Ordinance. In requirements of this initiative, arguments against is that its full implementation costs are unknown, but it is known that the city would incur a large initial cost to quadruple its streaming capabilities within 6 months and then comply annually with those requirements. And its requirement to accept public commentary virtually could favor non-residents. And the privacy policy prevents the city from collecting information about those participants, which may allow non-residents and special interests to participate. The time-certain agenda item requirement could disrupt the flow of meetings. That is Proposition E.
Thank you very much.
It's a lot.
That is a lot. Thank you very much, Ashley. If you've just tuned into our show, we're talking to Ashley James from the League of Women Voters. She's the chair of their Pros and Cons Guide to the Election. And we're going to take a break here for a second and be right back.
Interested in working in the restaurant industry? The Culinary Arts and Hospitality Management program at City College provides a 2-year program for those interested. CCSF's Culinary Arts and Hospitality Management Department has enjoyed an international reputation for thorough hands-on hospitality training at affordable prices. This department has graduated over 8,000 students while having an ongoing enrollment of 350 students. Students learn lectures and participate as cooks, hostess, and bartenders at the cafeteria and Pierre Cost dining room. Students in their last semester have an apprenticeship at a restaurant or hotel. For more information on the Culinary Arts and Hospitality Management Program, visit ccsf.edu/CAHS. That's ccsf.edu/CAHS, or call 415-239-3152. Once again, that's 415-239-3152. Applications for the following semester tend to fill up quickly. Apply when you can to become part of the Culinary Arts and Hospitality Management Program at City College of San Francisco.
And if you just tuned in to Voices of the Community, we are speaking with Ashley James. She's with the League of Women Voters and the chair of their Pros and Cons Guide to the election, and we're discussing the San Francisco propositions. And so I want to move on to one of the more controversial propositions on the ballot this year, and that's Proposition F. Ashley, could you share with us your pros and cons on that one?
Yeah, so Proposition F relates to short-term rentals. This is most famous as the Airbnb proposition. And it's an ordinance that was placed on the ballot by a voters' initiative, which is led by a coalition of tenants and landlords, neighborhood associations, affordable housing advocates, and other community members under the organization called Share Better SF. They have a website, it's sharebettersf.org, and this would require a simple majority of votes to pass, so 51%. The question is, should the city of San Francisco limit short-term rentals, which are less than 30 days, of housing units from 275 days per year, regardless of whether the owner of the unit lives in the unit or does not live in the unit. Require residents who offer short-term rentals to submit quarterly reports to the city, and prohibit short-term renting of all in-law units. And finally, allow individuals to sue hosting platforms for unlawfully listing a unit as a short-term rental. So some background on this is that in recent years, San Francisco has experienced rising rents and property values and a decrease in the availability of affordable housing, which I'm sure we've all experienced. At the same time, there's been a growth in the short-term rental market, which has been enabled by online hosting platforms like Airbnb, VRBO, and I think HomeAway is another platform. And so the city has already adopted regulation on these short-term rentals. And so I'm just going to quickly go through the existing regulations to see what's changed. So the existing rental is that permanent residents are the only people that can offer a unit for a short-term rent. And permanent is defined as someone who's lived in the unit for at least 60 consecutive days. There's a 90-day cap if the permanent resident does not live in the unit while they're renting it out. And there's no cap if the resident lives in the unit during the rental period. So that's the difference between unhosted and hosted. The hosting platforms have to notify users of the city's regulation. Rentals are subject to the hotel tax, and it's a misdemeanor for a resident to unlawfully rent their unit. Also, interested parties are the only ones that can sue violators, and the definition of an interested party is residents of the building, the owner of the unit, or nonprofit housing organizations. So this proposal would change this regulation to limit short-term renting to 75 days per year, regardless of whether the resident lives in the unit or does not. And the hosting platform would have to restrict any renting after the 75-day cap has been reached. It would preserve the regulation that only permanent residents can offer the unit for short-term rent, and require the person to register the unit with the city's planning department. And part of the registration would be to prove that they're the owner, and they're authorized to list the unit as a short-term rental. It would also require the city to put a notice on the building indicating the unit's been approved for short-term rental, and the city would also notify neighbors, so via a mailing, most likely. And it would require these hosts to report quarterly on the number of days that the resident has lived in the unit and the number of days it was rented out to allow the city to collect information relating to this regulation. So it would also require the hosting platform to report the number of nights rented on a quarterly basis. It would also allow interested parties to sue hosting platforms and individual violators for their failure to comply with the regulation. The definition of an interested party would expand to include people living within 100 feet of the unit. Also different in this measure is it would prohibit short-term renting of all in-law units, and it's a misdemeanor to violate this law. And so a yes vote means that you want the city to adopt these regulations, and a no vote means you do not want the city to make changes to the current regulation. So some arguments in favor are that the current regulation is weak and has been deemed by independent analysts to be unenforceable, meaning there's no information to collect in order to enforce the law. Also, this proposition would close loopholes and provide effective enforcement tools. limiting online hosting platforms to listing only the units that are registered with the city. It still allows all legally registered hosts to rent a spare room in their home for up to 75 days per year, and it provides notice to neighbors when a short-term rental is approved. Some arguments against is that San Francisco already has a regulation on short-term rentals. It's an expensive place to live, and sharing a room in a private home can make it more affordable, both for residents and then visitors who come to the city. Home sharing brings, visitors to more neighborhoods, not just downtown. And some studies show that Airbnb guests contribute almost $470 million to the economy and $6 million to the city directly through occupancy taxes. And another argument against Proposition S is that we should give the current regulation a chance before adopting a stricter regulation.
I want to move on to Proposition I, which I think is one of the other bigger propositions out there, and this is the moratorium on building in the Mission. So let's dive into Proposition I, and then we'll out of that we'll come into a station break and then come back.
So Proposition I is the Mission District Housing Moratorium. This was also an ordinance that was put on the ballot by a petition, which is signed by a sufficient number of voters, in this case about 50,000, and requires a simple majority of votes to pass. So the question is, should the city suspend issuing permits in the Mission District for 18 months and develop a neighborhood stabilization plan? So this measure would suspend all permits on housing and business development projects for 18 months, except for housing projects where all units are affordable to low and moderate income households. And you can find more information about the definition of low and moderate income on the city's website. This measure would also authorize a majority of the board to vote to extend this moratorium for another 12 months and also require them to develop a neighborhood stabilization plan. This plan would propose different policies, legislation, and funding to ensure that 50% of all new housing in that district would be affordable to low, moderate, and middle-income households. So a yes vote means that you support suspending permits issued by the city for certain types of real estate in the Mission District for at least 18 months, and a no vote means you do not support this. Some arguments in favor is that the Mission is a unique and diverse neighborhood, and recent growth in luxury development is changing its character by displacing businesses, artists, and residents, including nearly one-third of the Latino population. Another argument in favor of this is that 12% of housing units built in the Mission over the past 8 years qualify as affordable. And the majority of new housing developments being proposed in this district is market rate, not affordable. Further, the Mission has lost about 80 rent-controlled units each year due to Ellis Act conversions, condo conversions, and demolitions since 2006. Some arguments against Proposition I is that it will not stop evictions and will reduce the number of affordable homes by delaying or stopping the development of about 1,500 new homes, including hundreds of below-market rate units. Another argument against this proposition is that it would require taxpayers to fund the construction of affordable units. And this proposition may have many unintended consequences and could be in litigation for years related to its restriction on suspending city permits.
Thank you very much, Ashley. That was great and a very controversial issue facing San Francisco. If you've just tuned in, we are talking to Ashley James with the League of Women's Voters. She's the chair of our Pros and Cons Guide.
I teach. I sew. I'm a cook.
Which of these women should get an HIV test?
I sing.
All of them.
I pay the bills.
All women who are pregnant, or maybe soon, should take the test.
I'm a doctor.
With new treatments, more than 90% of babies born to HIV-infected women will be HIV-free.
I'm a clerk.
So talk with your healthcare professional.
I vote.
Or make a free confidential call to 1-800-342-AIDS and take the test.
A public service message brought to you by the Pediatric AIDS Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Bay Area Geek Guide is your #1 resource for conventions, events, classes, new releases, shows, comic stores, and more. From video games to tabletop, anime to sci-fi, cosplay to tech, the Bay Area Geek Guide keeps you up to date with a complete calendar of everything awesome. Find it online at bayareageekguide.com and Twitter at sfbayAreaGeek.
Welcome back to Voices of the Community. This is George Coster, and I'm here today with Ashley James with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. Ashley is the chair of the Pros and Cons Guide, and we're talking about the San Francisco election today, which we hope you get out there and vote. And the propositions, we're going to move on to Proposition D, and this is both a popular and controversial one because it deals with the waterfront and height. And so, Ashley, why don't you share with our listeners what Proposition D consists of?
Yeah, thanks for that overview. Proposition D is the Mission Rock development, and it's an ordinance that was put on the ballot by a voters' initiative and requires a simple majority of votes to pass. The specific question for this proposition is, should the city be allowed to increase the existing 40-foot height limit on 10 of the 28-acre proposed Mission Rock development site to a height of up to 240 feet, and make it city policy to encourage the development, which includes 8 acres of parks and open space and up to 40% affordable housing for low and middle income households. Some background on this proposition is that the city and the port own Mission Rock, which is a 28-acre waterfront site located just south of AT&T Park, across from Macovie Cove. If anyone has visited the yard most recently, it's in that location. And so the Giants own the site and have been working with the port to conduct public outreach to residents and adopt a vision statement and a developer. And so in June of last year, San Francisco passed Proposition B. And that proposition required voters to approve construction on waterfront property, because this property used to be owned by the port, that exceeds existing height limits. And the existing 40-foot height limit is what we are focusing on, which is why we have Prop B. And so the specific proposal is very narrow. It's increasing the existing 40-foot height limit on 10 acres of the development area to up to 240 feet, and restore Pier 48 to historic standards and adopt a city policy for this development. This measure would require all aspects of the development other than the height limit to be subject to the current public approval process, including environmental review. So the city planning department would, continue to process this application just like any other development proposal in the city. Although we have Proposition B, which requires voter approval for increasing the height limits on any waterfront property development. And so in this development, it's proposed that buildings along Terry Francois Boulevard would have a 120-foot height limit with building fronts of no more than 40 feet, and so they would stagger the development. Buildings above 90 feet would be limited to residential, restaurant, or retail uses, and no more than 3% of the total development area would have the 240-foot height limit. And then all remaining buildings on the site would be allowed a limit of 190 feet. And so some guidelines for this development is that it includes approximately 1,000 to 2,000 residential units. Most are rental, and 33% would be affordable to low and middle income households. And I believe the Giants have committed to increase that to up to 40%. It would also include 8 acres of parks, open space, and recreational opportunities. It would also have space for restaurants, retail, commercial, and other uses, and then creates 3,100 parking spaces. So the controller states that if this ordinance is approved, it would not in and of itself affect the cost of government. A yes vote means that you do support increasing the building height limit as laid out in this proposition. A no vote means you do not want to increase the height limit or adopt this city policy of supporting the development. So some arguments in favor is that the Giants, like I said before, raise the affordable housing commitment to 40%, and the development will convert the current asphalt parking lot into a new San Francisco neighborhood, creating affordable rental units, open space, and temporary construction and permanent jobs for the office and retail uses that would be developed, and also transit improvements along the light rail corridor there. It would also rebuild Pier 48 to house a new brewery. I believe Anchor Steam has been in talks with the developer, and that would have about 200 manufacturing jobs. Some arguments against Proposition D is that it allows an exemption for a single developer to be exempt from the existing city building height limits, increasing the limit from 1 story to 240 feet. Another argument against this proposition is that 5 of the 11 proposed high-rise towers would be either 190 or 240 feet tall. Further, this language is very aspirational in the proposition and doesn't provide any protection that's enforceable for the proposed open space, view corridors, or setback heights. So essentially, the voters are not able to vote on any specifics of the development. We're voting on the height limit. So there's nothing to enforce the rest of the development as proposed by the voters.
Thank you, Ashley. That was great. And I want to turn now to Proposition K, which is interesting in that the idea here is to use publicly held land that the school district might own, the city owns, for public housing. It's one of the 4 different propositions on affordable housing. And this one, some context for City College of San Francisco parkers. One of the lower parking lots in the main campus on Ocean happens to be Balboa Reservoir, and that is conceivably one of the sites that could be used for housing. So, Ashley, please provide a little overview on this really interesting idea.
Yeah, it's a little known facet of city government that they've identified as a potential opportunity to create more affordable housing units among other public uses. And so, Proposition K is also known as the Surplus Public Lands Ordinance, and it is a proposed ordinance placed on the ballot by Board of Supervisor members Kim, Avalos, Cohen, Wiener, and Marr. It requires a simple majority of votes to pass, which is 51%. The question is, should the city expand the allowable uses of surplus property to include building affordable housing and expand the annual process of identifying surplus property? So some background on this, in addition to what you gave, is that the City of San Francisco's existing policy regulating use of its surplus property does not include a requirement to build affordable housing. So each year, city departments are required to identify surplus property. And so how they might identify this is if they have acquired land to build, roads or any real estate, and there is extra land left over, essentially, that doesn't have a building on it. And then the city transfers that surplus property over to the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, and that office determines if the property is suitable for affordable housing. Some departments that are exempt are Recreation and Parks, the Port, the Airport, the Public Utilities Commission, and Muni. And so this proposal would expand the allowable use of surplus property to include building affordable housing for a range of households. So households from homeless to very low income, all the way up to 120% of area median income. And it would also make it city policy to ask other local agencies, such as school districts, including City College, to notify the city before selling property and to give the city an opportunity to buy it for affordable housing. So a yes vote means that you authorize the city to expand the allowable uses of its surplus public property to include building affordable housing, and a no vote means that you do not authorize the city to expand the allowable use of its land. to build affordable housing. So some arguments in favor of this is that it allows the city to use excess land for housing for a broad range of residents, from homeless to middle-income families. For sites where housing doesn't exist, it ensures the city uses its public land for public purposes, such as open space, childcare, transit, and infrastructure. An argument against Proposition K is that the city should sell surplus land at the market rate only.
I think it's an interesting idea because there's so much public land hanging out there, and hopefully people will get their arms around the idea of being able to use a lot of different public land for different uses. Go ahead.
Right, except that I just wanted to reiterate that the departments that would be exempt include recreation and parks, the port, the airport, the Public Utilities Commission, and Muni. So we're not talking about redeveloping like Dolores Park into affordable housing or anything like that.
Good point. Good point. It's schools, for example. It's old reservoirs like the Balboa Reservoir that people park their car on at City College. So it's an interesting idea. We'll see how far it gets. I want to turn to one last proposition here before we start to wrap up our show, and I think we have enough time to actually do Proposition J, which is the legacy business proposition. And this one's kind of interesting, and Ashley, give us your overview on this one.
Yeah, this one is interesting. So it is an ordinance that was put on the ballot by Board of Supervisor members Campos, Avalos, Kim, and Marr, and requires a simple majority votes to pass. And the question is, should the city establish the Legacy Business Historic Preservation Fund, which would provide grants to legacy businesses and building owners who have leased their space to businesses for at least 10 years, and expand the definition of a legacy business to include those businesses that have operated in the city for more than 20 years and are at risk of displacement. So some background on this is that the City Administrative Code currently provides for a legacy business registry. And the purpose of the registry is to recognize that long-standing community-serving businesses may be valuable cultural assets for the city. This current program does not provide grants to qualified historic business owners or their landlords who own the building. So this proposal would amend the code to assist long operating businesses to remain in the city by creating a fund to support them. So nominations for registry participants would be limited to 300 businesses per year. And then the proposition would set up subsidies that vary based on the number of workers at a cap of $50,000 per year per business. This fund would be funded by the general city budget, and the controller estimates that there are about 7,500 businesses in the city that qualify under the current language. And so a qualified business could receive a grant of $500 per full-time employee, up to a maximum of 100 employees, and to be full-time employees. If it was determined that a business faced immediate risk of displacement, and the grant would be what they needed to prevent displacement, and there was not enough money in the fund to make a grant, the Small Business Commission, which would administer this new fund, could request an appropriation from the Board of Supervisors. Also, the Board of Supervisors could, without a vote of the people, amend this code as long as it's consistent with the original purpose of the proposition. So a yes vote means that you are in favor of establishing this fund, and a no vote means you do not favor establishing this fund. Some arguments in favor of this is that it would support the nonprofits, artists, small businesses, and their employees who might otherwise have to leave the city because of increased rent, and that these businesses and organizations contribute greatly to the character of our city by essentially being cultural assets. Some arguments against Prop J is that the program's cost is funded by the city's general fund, would be unsustainable over time, as the businesses may be eligible to receive grants, even if they're not financially struggling. So choosing the final argument against this is the process of selecting who exactly is a legacy business would be up to the Board of Supervisors, who might use that power to get favor. So essentially, this is an invitation for direct political patronage between businesses and the Board of Supervisor members.
If you just tuned in to Voices of the Community, we've been talking with Ashley James from the League of Women Voters in San Francisco. She's the chair of the Pros and Cons Guide to the election, and we've been discussing the topics of around each of the propositions, pros, cons, and we hope that you've enjoyed the show. I want to turn to Ashley here for a few moments as we start to wrap up and share with our audience how you can get engaged with supporting the League of Women Voters.
Yeah, so you can engage with the League of Women Voters online. We have social media pages, and so if you just search for LWVSF, you can find us, or go to lwvsf.org to check out our website, where you can find out how to support us. We are a member organization, and so it'd be great to become a member and support the League that way, or donate. Also, we always love to have volunteers. We do our work on committees, and so we're always looking for people to help with committees, including voter services. So if you're interested in this, you could shoot me an email at elections.guide@lwvsf.org to find out how to write some of the guide next year. And if you are a member of the League, you receive monthly newsletters, and we also give action alerts. You could attend one of our events or a candidate forum, and we do have the candidate forums for this election season on our website right now. And so I would just went over the propositions. And so if you're interested in learning more about some of the candidates that are on the ballot, you can definitely check out the videos there today. You can also, if you're a member with us, learn how to serve on a board or commission in the city. As Proposition E stated, there's over 120 of them, and oftentimes there's vacancies. It's a great way to get involved in local government. And you could also participate in a study of an issue. A lot of our members come to the League because they're passionate about a specific issue. For example, last year, human trafficking was a big issue, also climate change. And the regional league, Bay Area League, does a lot related to environmental issues. And you should definitely vote today. If you go on our website or check out smartvoter.org, you can find the polling place that's closest to you.
Thank you, Ashley. And I know we're coming up on a big election for 2016. Do you want to share a little bit about how the League is kind of ramping up to take on the presidential election along with a very large statewide election?
Yeah, so we're definitely, looking for new members and volunteers to help. Next year is going to be a huge year. There's 11 propositions on the ballot this year. Next year, with how high profile the election is going to be, we anticipate a lot more propositions, which means a lot more people helping to research and to also provide the guide through some of our forums and speakers bureau, like opportunities like this to talk with you today about propositions. And so the more the merrier. And you can go on our website, like I said, at lwvsf.org. And we'd love to, keep in touch with City College as well and provide more information about the elections. Once the City Department of Elections finalizes which propositions will be on the ballot in August, so right at the start of the school year next year.
Thank you, Ashley. And we hope that you've heard all this, after hearing all this really great information from Ashley about the propositions, the pros and cons, that you'll get out there today and vote before 8 o'clock. And remember, you can drop off your ballot at a polling place, or City Hall in San Francisco has collection boxes outside until 8 o'clock. And if you can't do that, make sure you get to the post office and get it postmarked today before 5 so that you can get to the elections office by November 6th. And you can follow KCSF on our Twitter feed at KCSF_radio. You can follow me on Twitter at George Coster Don't forget to check us out on our Facebook page and like us. And if you want to listen to other KCSF shows, go to mixcloud.com/KCSF radio. And once again, we appreciate Ashley's time today and hope that you get out there and exercise your vote.
KCSF, your community, your radio.